Welcome back to another video tutorial. In this video tutorial, we're going to take a closer look into the Watch API and see how Watch API taking action on building form applications with the React hook form. So let's get into the practical example. So if you're learning React, you probably be quite familiar with building form controlled. In fact, I'll just quickly do example of building a controlled form. Actually controlled input. So the typical way is having React with .userState, and we're providing a default value, and then we assign a value and set value into the input itself. And what it does is every keystroke we render and also updating the view. So an example would be like giving a value, and then we also want to have on change plugged in as well, and making sure you're providing the actual value, which is e.target.value. e.target.value. Here we go. And as you can see, every keystroke will trigger re-render and updating your view. And that's what controlled input or controlled form is all about. So what's the difference in React hook form is uncontrolled form by nature, because we want to taking care about the scalability. When your application gets larger and complicated, we have the capability to optionally subscribing to the input, so your component actually only get re-render with the one that you're actually subscribing to. But by default, if you just invoking Watch API, in this case, that means you want to subscribing everything on the form. So let me just putting down another input and showcase what's happening if we just providing nothing to the Watch API. So this is kind of typical like controlled form. Every keystroke we trigger re-rendering, and Watch will returning everything. But the good thing about Watch API is, again, you can optionally subscribing to individual inputs. So if I supplying the targeted input name, for example, if I just want to know last name, then this what this does is now if I change on the first name, the re-render doesn't happen because you're not subscribing to it, because React hook form knows you only want to know the last name. So when you type in last name, re-render happens and we're sending down everything. So that's really good. The other API of the Watch is you can even supply with an array. So if I go first name and last name, and oops, no, got a typo in there. What this does now is we're actually subscribing to two of them, and by providing an array, we're actually returning an array as well. So you can see that we're returning undefined. And as we started typing, oh, I must have made a mistake on the typo with the first name. That's good. We're going to showcase with the TypeScript support so we don't make this kind of mistake as well. Now, this should work. If my cosine can get back, yes, nice. So that's working, and is returned as an array, which is what we expected as well. Really good. Now you probably noticed that the initial render actually returning undefined. So you'd be like, oh, why is that happening? Right, because Watch, it's like a function. So when the first time it gets executed, it hasn't reached the render function just yet. So the first initial invocation, it's actually gonna be undefined. So how do you solve that problem if you say like I want to have a default value? So the first way for you to look at it is actually you can providing a default value, which is second argument. So in this case, I can say I want this first render to be Bill. And now if I refresh, it's gonna returning the default value. So the second argument of Watch API, it's always gonna returning supplying with the default value. But there is another even better way to doing that. It's actually supplying a default values for your entire form. And let me show you what are the benefits out of that. So if I supplying with the default value, first, straight away we see underlining with the type error, because we actually try to infer back to the default values to knowing the type of your form. Now if you're correcting this, which was first name equal Bill and the last name equal Law, now those error will goes away. In fact, it even picked up there's no such input as Agile, which is typo in here. So we can fix that as well by providing a default value, say age as 0. Now this is done. We can actually removing the default inline default value with watch. Although it's a pretty convenient API sometimes for you to use. If you don't really care about default value, then you can supply an inline default value. But it's always a good way to actually provide everything in your form. So now that works, and that works for an array as well. If I refresh this, oh, don't even do fast refresh, kick it in, nice. And if we want to say watch the entire form, it returns all of that. One of the things I like about array syntax is like when return an array as well, it also give you a bit of a type definition as well. So if I go first name, last name, I can see they are actually type it as a string. That's a string as well. So once you're providing a default value, it providing the way that watch to return the initial value on the first execution, and also they give you a really good type check. Cool. So we cover some of the basic usage of watch API. So you can supply with individual input, supply with an array of input, and also watch the entire form application when things get changed. So one thing you notice is the re-render always happen at the root of your application, which where you executing the useForm. That's why we have another hook called UseWatch, which I'm going to cover in another video. This allows you to actually isolating your component re-render in a component level. So you can say, I don't want to re-render at the root. I want to only re-render on subcomponent A or subcomponent B. So that's another way of actually improve your application performance. If re-render at the root, it's gonna be a little bit heavy, and so that you have to do like memorization, etc. So it will allow you to precisely re-render whenever you want to re-render. Anyway, that's got a little bit sidetracked. The other syntax is actually calling that at use effect. And what this is gonna does is it's gonna be very useful if you want to actually subscribing to the whole application and without wanting any re-render at all. And I found this really useful is, say for example, if you want to actually tracking the entire application, the user behavior. So you don't really care about things rendered on the screen, and you only want to subscribing to all the inputs change. And what do we do? Gonna be subscription equal watch, and this is gonna be a callback instead. And what does is gonna returning the data, so we can actually subscribe to that and have a look what that actually return as well. And making sure that we also want to unsubscribe that when the component gets unmounted, so the subscription gets cancelled after the component gets unmounted. Now, let's see what's happening. So what's happening is, see, the re-render doesn't get changed at all, but everything still gets sent back to this callback. So it's a really useful way of knowing what's happening on the form and subscribing to them and reporting back to any kind of analytic tool that you have. So the last thing I think I want to cover is, yes, the confusion about putting the watch result as a use effect dependency array. So a lot of people does this, and then people goes like React, the use effect as dependency array, and thinking about that this value will trigger some sort of use effect. But the reality is, watch is always going to returning a new fresh value, because it was meant to be used inside the render rather than inside the use effect. So watches will always produce a new value by what's been watching. So instead of doing this kind of thing, it's actually more or recommended it to doing inside of your render function. So you can say, for example, if first name equal Bill, Bill1, and then we got, this is the fake one. Otherwise, we will be just doing wait. Let's just quickly see that. So right now it's wait. If I type 1, it get changed to this is a fake one. So really what returned by watch is really useful when you actually kind of integrate it into the render function, rather than treat them as a user effect or side effect of your application. So cool, I think I pretty much covered the entire watch API, and I think I'm going to keep doing this kind of individual video tutorial covering individual API and kind of branching into something a little bit more complicated later on. So I'll cover all these API in the following weeks or so. So I hope you guys find this useful, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks, bye.